Hi everyone, welcome back to Level Up English. This video is for everyone around the world who wants to understand what's happening and hear real-world topics explained in clear, natural English.
Today, we're talking about the protests in Iran, not to tell you what to think, but to help you understand how people around the world talk about these events in everyday English.
Understanding this kind of language helps you follow international news more easily and feel less lost when serious global events are discussed.
It also gives you the confidence to talk about complex topics using natural, real-world English.
Over the past months, protests have taken place in many cities across Iran, as more and more people have expressed frustration with daily life, economic pressure, and long-standing restrictions.
What may have started as individual complaints gradually turned into broader demonstrations, spreading from one city to another and drawing international attention.
When people talk about this situation, they often use certain words and expressions that appear again and again in news reports and conversations.
In many news reports, you'll hear the word crackdown used when journalists describe how authorities respond to large public protests or unrest.
A crackdown means that the government uses force, strict rules, or heavy pressure in an attempt to stop demonstrations and bring the situation under control.
So when you hear a sentence like, "The protests were met with a heavy crackdown," it usually suggests a very strong and forceful response.
An internet shutdown happens when access to online services is limited or completely blocked, and in this case, access was completely blocked, making it extremely difficult for people to communicate, share videos, or get information out to the rest of the world.
A complete internet blackout can leave people feeling isolated, anxious, and powerless because they lose not only communication with the outside world, but also their sense of stability and normal routine.
In some international reports and human rights discussions, the word massacre is used to describe what happened. This word is very strong, and it refers to the killing of a large number of civilians in a short period of time, often in a way that shocks the global community.
Because of how serious this word is, it's usually used carefully, often by observers or human rights organizations, when they believe the scale and severity of the violence went far beyond isolated incidents.
So, when people use the word massacre, they're emphasizing how shocking and unacceptable the level of violence was. Another word you may hear is bloodshed. This word refers to the loss of life and suffering caused by violent conflict.
Bloodshed doesn't focus on details. Instead, it highlights the human cost of violence, especially when ordinary people and civilians are affected.
When international media use the word bloodshed, they're trying to communicate how tragic and serious the situation has become. Words like massacre and bloodshed are not used lightly, but they help explain why events like these resonate far beyond one country.
They help people around the world understand the seriousness of what's happening.
You may hear the phrase civilian casualties. This refers to ordinary people, not soldiers or armed groups, who are killed or injured during violence.
This term is widely used in international news and human rights reports because it clearly distinguishes between civilians and combatants, and it emphasizes that innocent people are being harmed.
So, when reports mention civilian casualties, they're highlighting that everyday people, families, workers, and bystanders are paying the price.
The presence of civilian casualties often raises serious concern worldwide because it points to a high human cost and potential violations of basic human rights. When civilian casualties are reported, it often draws serious concern around the world because it highlights the high human cost and possible violations of basic human rights.
Propaganda refers to information that is deliberately presented in a biased or misleading way in order to influence public opinion. It often appears during times of conflict or unrest, when those in power try to shape how events are understood by, emphasizing certain details while downplaying or completely ignoring others.
In other words, propaganda can strongly affect how people interpret reality by controlling which stories are told and which are left out.
Another term frequently used in international coverage is demonstration, which tends to sound more formal and neutral than the word protest.
A demonstration is an organized public gathering where people express opposition or support for a cause. Journalists often use this term because it describes the action without emotional judgment.
When reports mention a wave of protests, they're usually pointing to a pattern rather than a single event, suggesting that public action is spreading and gaining momentum.
Exactly. A wave of protests means demonstrations are happening repeatedly over time, often across multiple cities or regions, which signals that the issue resonates widely.
The phrase "cut off from the outside world" is often used to describe how people experience isolation during crises, especially when communication channels disappear.
This typically happens because of internet shutdowns, media restrictions, or border closures. When people are cut off like this, they can't share information or even check on loved ones abroad.
Rather than focusing on one incident, analysts often use the word unrest to describe a broader atmosphere of instability and tension within a society.
Unrest suggests ongoing dissatisfaction and pressure, often involving protests, strikes, or clashes, and it usually indicates deeper, unresolved social or political problems.
In more serious reporting, the phrase "widespread fatalities" is used to highlight the scale of loss rather than individual cases.
It means deaths are occurring across different areas, not just in one place, and it's a formal expression often used when violence affects multiple communities.
At the heart of many protests is the issue of freedom of expression, which relates to people's ability to speak openly without fear.
This right includes sharing opinions, criticizing authority, and expressing ideas peacefully. When it's restricted, people often feel they have no voice, which can lead to unrest.
In formal international discussions, the phrase "severe human rights violations" carries significant weight and is used very carefully.
It refers to extremely serious abuses, such as unlawful killings, torture, or violent suppression of peaceful protest, and it signals deep concern from global organizations.
After serious incidents, conversations often turn toward what's known as a call for justice, reflecting a demand for answers and fairness.
A call for justice means people want accountability and transparency, especially when harm or loss of life has occurred. It's about responsibility, not revenge.
Some observers interpret these developments not just as protests, but as part of a broader revolution, suggesting something more fundamental is taking place.
A revolution represents a deep challenge to an existing system and reflects widespread demands for structural and long-term change.
The phrase "criminalization of protest" is used when peaceful protest is treated as a crime. Instead of being seen as a basic civic right, protest is punished through arrests, legal charges, or harsh penalties.
Internationally, this term signals a shift from managing dissent to actively suppressing it through the legal system.
Another phrase often used in international reporting is "global outrage," which describes strong emotional reactions from people, media, and organizations around the world.
Global outrage usually follows reports of serious violence, civilian harm, or human rights violations.
At the beginning of this episode, we talked about Iran. When people use the phrase "fundamental change," this is what they're referring to. Not small adjustments, but a deep shift in how life, rights, and power are experienced.
It points to a moment where people are thinking long-term, questioning the system itself, and imagining a future that looks fundamentally different from the present.
That brings us back to a very important question, one that many people are quietly asking.
It's a question that doesn't have a simple answer, because fundamental change rarely happens overnight. It builds through pressure, sacrifice, and moments when people begin to see the future differently from the present.
History reminds us that real change is rarely immediate. It grows through struggle until ideas, voices, and actions finally come together. So when do you think fundamental or real change actually happens?
If this conversation made you think, we'd really like to hear your perspective in the comments.
And if you find these discussions useful, feel free to like the video and subscribe for more episodes like this.